Hi guys. Not feeling great today, so I'm going to make this as brief as possible. Um, if you hear any noises in the background, that's because my cats are being crazy. Um, Leo knocked over the cactus, and now there's cat hair all over it, and dirt all over the ground. So that's fun. But today we're going to be talking about the market revolution of 1800 to 1840. And this is also basically going to go into the Industrial Revolution happening in the United States, um, and which is a reaction to the Industrial Revolution happening in England. So, the market revolution came about through innovations such as the railroad, steamships, canal works, and the Industrial Revolution. This is between 1800 to 1850 or 1840, it just depends on who you ask. And during this period, people increasingly bought and sold goods rather than make them for themselves. So this is going to be kind of the beginning of like consumerism. I don't know if you guys know what consumerism is, but it's basically the idea that people go out and buy what they want, and instead of making it yourself. It's kind of similar to like a consumer economy, which is what we are in right now. So like, for example, how many of you guys have made a blanket or like a pillow before? No, you don't. You go out and buy a blanket or pillow from the store. It's just how we do things now. But that started from this time. Okay. The U.S. market is going to expand, and this is going to kind of be because of a lot of the tariffs and like the Embargo Act that Jefferson did. People are going to have to kind of start making things for themselves rather than relying on importing them from other countries. Um, but over a few decades of buying and selling multiplied while incomes rose. The U.S. economy growth kind of went around with free enterprise, which is the freedom of private businesses to operate competitively for profit with little government regulation. We'll later talk about like laissez-faire economics, which is hands-off economics, which is like kind of reaction to like mercantilism, if you remember what that is. And the idea is that now we're creating our own businesses rather than being regulated by like the mother country or by the government. So, in their pursuit of profits, entrepreneurs invested their own money in new industries, creating businesses and spurring innovation and new inventions, such as these. So, an inventor or entrepreneurs began to develop goods and make life more comfortable for more people. Um, you know, I don't know if you've heard the saying, necessity is the mother of invention. So the idea is like inventors and entrepreneurs see a problem and they then try to solve said problem by making something. While some inventions simply made life more enjoyable, others fueled the economic revolution and transformed manufacturing, transportation, and communication. A couple of these are going to be like the telegraph and the steamboat. So Samuel B. Morse is going to create the telegraph, which sent messages in code over wire in a matter of seconds. And we kind of talked about that a little bit the other day. I think Monday. Oh no, sorry, not Monday. Um, Tuesday. Like how it was a great help to update family and to get help from a doctor, all that kind of stuff. And then you have the steamboat, which is going to be an amazing um, invention for two reasons. One, it allowed people to travel long distances over water, and two, because we're not relying on the wind or a water currents, we can actually go upstream and downstream. So now we can use the like two modes of transportation. So we can go upstream, which made it so more of the river is available, and it also streamlined travel and made it speed up transportation. Here you have a steamboat. The engine would be here. Obviously, um, it's powered by steam. You would heat up some coals and the water, and like the steam from the water would then propel the propeller thingy going. 1811 is going to be the first steamship. It's going to be used to transport goods, materials, and people, especially towards westward expansion, and it's going to have a really big impact on trade. Here you have the Morse telegraph, which Morse created, and yes, it's Morse as in Morse code. It's the same Morse. But messages were able to send long distances, which is very, very, very fast. A lot faster than mail or walking a message to another town. You also have photographs that were invented. The daguerreotype, I believe is how you say it, which is early photography. Basically, if you see that little dot on this box, it kind of concentrates light, and you would use that concentrated light on this, I think film. I think it's like bronze plate that has like iodine on it, and the light will burn in the image onto this iodine plate, and then they would use like steamed mercury to like keep the image on that plate. And this is going to be the first form of photography in the United States. This dude, Robert Cornelius, this is a self-portrait or a self-picture, aka a selfie, and that was 1839. Alright, so the transportation revolution is going to really help out industrialization and just like the market economy in the United States. So some of the things that are going to come about are going to be turnpikes, stagecoaches, canals, steamboats, and railroads. We've already talked about steamboats. I don't really have much information on stagecoaches in the canal, but basically they are like carriages drawn by horses, but they're like covered carriages, and they're meant to travel long distances. Alright, so the market revolution transforms the nation. During the 1800s, most still lived in rural areas, so just farms and small communities. Only about 14% of workers had manufacturing jobs. Many American made goods became affordable, and improvements in transportation allowed people to purchase items manufactured in distant places. So like textiles or cloth made in like New York could be easily purchased here in like South Carolina or in Georgia. And I'm going to show you in the slide later on like how long it would take these goods to be shipped before versus after the transportation revolution. By the 1840s, improvements in transportation and communication also made America's regions interdependent, meaning that they relied on each other. So the cotton that is going to, like South Carolina and the South are going to switch from like tobacco being our main cash crop to now, cotton being our main cash crop. And the North is going to be very dependent on this cotton that the South is going to crave. If you think back to when we talked about Henry Clay and the American system, and the idea is that each of the regions of the United States are going to depend heavily on one another, which are going to make just basically improve the American economy. The image on this slide is of the Erie Canal, which is a very big, very long canal in Albany, New York, meant to be able to shipping goods over long periods or long distances. Also, we're going to have railroad lines, telegraph wires, and steamboats, which are all going to link and contribute, linking the East and the West together. So you're also going to have roads. So this Cumberland Road is going to be um, one way that these, like, what are they called again? Carriages are going to travel long distances on a relatively even road. This right here, in the green, the Lancaster Turnpike, um, a turnpike is not really it. You would think it sounds like an on or off ramp. That's not what it is. A turnpike is actually a privately owned road, so like a toll road. I don't know why it's called turnpike. I think that's a really stupid name, but that's besides the point. But basically, these privately owned roads are going to be well maintained, and they're going to kind of revolutionize travel. They're going to make it a lot easier for carriages to go distances. Here you have the railroad. In 1830, there's like 100 miles of railroad. In 1840, there's 3,500 miles. In 1860, there's 30,600 miles. So it's kind of dangerous at first. There's not really brakes or good brakes on the trains. They were very prone to catching fire. They did not take turns very, very well. Um, and also, if they went through a field, they would kill cows. So there's kind of an issue with that. But it did revolutionize travel, made it a lot faster to transport goods and people. Also, the railroad is going to make time more of a thing. So, for example, before the 1800s, people kind of just showed up when they showed up. So, like the biggest job was going to be like farming. You would get up at dawn or before dawn, start farming, and then towards dusk or when the sun sets, you're going to be done, and that's a full day's work. At For like lawyers or doctors, they like if you had to schedule an appointment, it was like around noon or when the sun was up and like highest in the sky. There wasn't really a specific time. Clocks weren't really all that um, used as much. Mostly like the upper class had like pocket watches, and um, it wasn't really. You would kind of go off of like church bells rather than alarm clocks or telling time that way. But once the railroads became more of a thing, and trains kind of had to show up on time or they would crash into one another, um, telling time and clocks became way more important. Speaking of trains, this is actually going to be, or is widely believed to be one of the first um, trains built entirely in the United States, and it's actually from Charleston, South Carolina. And you can see this replica um, in Charleston. It's right across the street from the Children's Museum. You probably have walked past it like hundreds of times. But this was the first. It wasn't the first train, but it went like 20 miles per hour, like 16 to 14 to 20 miles per hour, which was super fast at the time. And it was pretty reliable until it exploded. And the reason why it exploded was the guy in charge of loading up the wood, making the steam and everything. He got tired of the whistling of the steam, and so he covered up the valve so it wouldn't release, because that's what was making the whistling noise. And then because the pressure wasn't able to release, it exploded. So that wasn't great. So this obviously is not. This picture is not of the actual Best Friend Express. It is a replica, but it's just really fascinating. So this is what the image I was referring to. So if you were in, let's say, New York, to get like to any other place, it would take a pretty long time. So traveling around New York might take a day. Going to another state, 2 days, and so on and so forth. So if you're in New York and you're trying to get to Louisiana, it would take you like five weeks to get there, which is like more than a month, which is crazy. But like after the transportation revolution, this drastically decreased travel times. So if you were in New York and you needed to get to Louisiana, it might take you 2 weeks rather than 5 weeks or 6 weeks. All right, so the Erie Canal is going to be one of the ways that this water travel and transportation is going to be greatly reduced. So it was built in 1818 to 1825 and is 363 miles long, and it cost $7,143,000, which was a lot of money, especially back then. I don't have the conversion right in front of me right now, but just know that that's a lot of money, especially back then. And it took like years. I believe it was like 8 years, and it was dangerous, and also people were kind of frustrated because the builders would trample over farmland. They would cut down forests without getting the proper approval to do so. So that was kind of some of the issues, but it became a success. It's also the first canal built in the United States, and it was the first time anything this big had ever been built before, and no one really knew how to do it. So it's kind of a fluke that it was successful, but then it kind of started this like canal revolution in the United States, and more canals were built. Here you have the Erie Canal starting from Albany, New York, ending in Buffalo. So it kind of connects this the Hudson River to Lake Erie, which is going to be one of the Great Lakes. And this is going to greatly help the transportation of goods and people. All right, so because of this transportation, I know I referenced this before about like the goods and everything. We're going to have factories starting to come about. And this is going to be a difference from like the what was it? Oh man, I can't even think of the term right now. Basically, before the factories system, people would cottage industry. That's what it is. People would make the goods and textiles at home, and then they would trade it, or which was more normal in the United States. We would just buy our textiles from another country, like England. But now, because of like Jefferson's embargo, or like a lot of the tariffs, which made foreign goods more expensive, we now are going to start producing more things here in the United States. So by the mid-19th century, new machines allowed unskilled workers to perform tasks that had once taken the effort of trained artisans, which created mills. One of the first really successful mills is going to be the Lowell textile mills in the 1820s, which employed thousands of women. The mill owners sought female employees because they could pay them less than their male counterparts. And they also could treat them not as well. Working conditions deteriorated. The factories were often very dirty, very cramped. Women were kind of locked in the building so they couldn't steal textiles. They would work 12-hour days, and it's cramped, hot, dark. A lot of times there wasn't enough windows, there wasn't enough air, so it's like really stuffy. They also would start hiring children too, but that's going to kind of like pick up and become more of an issue during like the second wave of the Industrial Revolution. But as you can see, factories are going to mostly pop up around the north. So like Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New York, New Jersey, that area. Um, and because these textile factories are popping up, what are you going to need for the textiles? Well, you're going to need cotton, because that's what they're making these cloths out of. And so the South is going to kind of stop doing tobacco, rice, and indigo as much, and now focus primarily on producing cotton, because that was what was making them the most money. They're selling cotton to not only the United States, but also to England and other countries. And the invention of the cotton gin by Eli Whitney is also going to make it so they could mass produce cotton a lot faster. So the cotton gin was to pick out cotton seeds out of the plant, which usually would take a person a long time, and the seeds are very sharp, and so their hands would get all prickly and all that. And Eli Whitney originally invented the cotton gin in order to reduce the need for slave labor, but unfortunately, he had his invention caused the exact opposite problem. So he wanted to get rid of slavery in the United States, and instead he increased slavery in the United States, because now you needed less people to be involved in the cotton process. So now you can put more people in the fields and transporting things rather than doing the picking seeds and stuff. So there's an increased demand, which is causing the increase of the supply, or the switch to cotton. You're going to see this often as cotton is king, or cotton is going to be making the most money. But we're going to see increase in the creation of an internal slave trade. The Mississippi, Louisiana, Georgia, and Alabama are going to have lots and lots and lots of new slavery and increased slavery. So here you have cotton mills. Oh, sorry, that was a really big switch. I have an image that has some, to show the increase of the slavery, but you gotta hold with me. Here you have the cotton mills in the 1820s. In 1793, Eli Whitney invents the cotton gin. Then in 1810 and 1820, the cotton boom starts because of England. And then in 1820, the well textile factories were invented, which also increased. Also, the cotton gin, they had interchangeable parts, which meant that you could easily repair the machine, which this kind of revolutionizes how things are going to be built as well. And so here you have the expansion of slavery. As you can see, the more dense areas are going to be the areas that have most of the most amount of slaves. So over here in South Carolina, those are going to be the increased slave population is going to be for the growing of cotton, whereas in Baton Rouge and all that, those are going to be I guess, yeah, all of it's going to be, these are all for cotton production in the South. But yeah. So, obviously, you can't really talk about the expansion of slavery without talking about, the effect it had, and what were some of the reactions and responses to this inequality and the slavery. So, slavery was really strong in the South because of, mostly because the plantation owners were the ones who were making policies and were controlling society. In New York, they would often use slave labor in shipping and manufacturing, which was later switched to immigrant labor, but we'll talk about that later. There are going to be abolitionist organizations created, which we'll talk about again later. An abolitionist is somebody who disagrees with slavery and wants to get rid of it. They want to abolish slavery, the immediate getting rid of it. So you have immediate emancipation and prolonged emancipation. Immediate emancipation emancipation is get rid of slavery right now, and then prolonged emancipation is more gradual. So we'll get rid of slavery eventually, but we need to start putting policies in place and basically prepare Americans for getting rid of slavery. So you have two abolition societies that kind of start pretty early on. You have the Pennsylvania Abolition Society, which started in 1775, and the New York Manumission Society in 1785. You're also going to have schools that are created to educate freedmen and children of freedmen. Then you have Vermont in 1777 is going to outlaw slavery. And then remember, the Northwest Territory is also going to have slavery illegal. However, not everyone is going to be happy about that. So one example of that is going to be the Ohio Black Codes. And basically what these were, they were laws that were put in place in Ohio by the people who moved there. So a lot of them were people from southern slave states, and they put restrictions on African Americans so they could not vote, hold office, serve in the militia, or serve on the jury. And one of the reasons that's an issue is that, like, say someone is convicted of a crime and they happen to be African American. Well, on the jury, aka the people who are going to be dealing out their sentence, if an African American is not allowed to be on the jury, then that means the only people there are all like white people. And so a lot of times you had African Americans who were unjustly convicted of crimes because they didn't have the jury of their peers. Then you have this new movement, which is inherently, technically not bad, but it was kind of a racist movement, and which is the American Colonization Society, which basically these people wanted to move like freedmen, so like freed African Americans. They wanted to get them out of the country and move them to Africa, to specifically Liberia. Basically, some of them were doing it because they believed that, oh, we should let them go back to their homeland, which, if you think about it, slavery's been around since the 1400s. These people had never lived in Africa, and so they have no idea what's in Africa, or they don't have, that's not their culture. Their culture is America. They're Americans. Then you have the other thing where, like, oh, well, we don't really want them in the United States because, you know, we're a white country, so we need to ship them back to another country. So, I mean, some of the people actually had good intentions. Others, their intentions were not great. So, I could talk for a very long time about the Liberation Society, or the Colonization Society, but that's not for today. Alright, urbanization. Basically, because of the factories and because of like textiles and the transportation, now people are going to start moving to cities. They're going to move to urban centers. And this is going to cause like the population to become more dense, meaning that people are going to live more closely together. The cities are going to get more crowded. Also, a middle class is going to grow. So before, basically, a lot of the times in the United States, and honestly in the world, you're either rich or you were poor. That was it. You either had a lot of money or you didn't have any money. Now, because of urbanization and the growth of businesses and free market economy, we're going to have this thing called the middle class, which is we have just enough money and like a little bit extra. So we're going to, like, people are living comfortably, is what the middle class is. And we, in the United States, we have a fairly large middle class. And basically, this is going to be business owners, people who work in jobs such as like teachers or lawyers or professions such as artisans, that kind of stuff. They make pretty good money. They don't have to work 12-hour days or slave away on a farm. And this middle class is going to benefit a lot from like consumerism and the creation of businesses and textiles and like furniture. People are going to start buying, and rugs and all that kind of stuff. But this increase in urbanization is also going to cause an increase in population. So as you can see, the population is going to greatly increase. We're going from like 3 million people in the United States to about 31 million people in the United States. It's like not 10%, but a pretty big increase. I'm not math teacher, so I don't know off the top of my head. Immigration is also going to increase during this time. A lot of people are going to come to the United States looking for jobs. And mostly during like the 1830s and 1860s. Nearly 3 million immigrants were added to the population, increasing, the population size. More than 1 million of those were Irish immigrants who fled their homeland after diseased potatoes caused the Great Potato Famine, which led to mass starvation and death. So people were dying because they didn't have any food, which was caused by the British, but that's not American history. And so these people left looking for jobs, looking for new opportunities, looking for food, and came to the United States. However, they're not going to be met with open arms. There's going to be two new thought groups or two new ideas or what is the word I'm looking for? Mentalities, there you go, that are going to start emerging in the United States, and that's nativism and xenophobia, which are vocab words that you do need to know because they show up a lot, not to mention it's kind of relevant, but nativism is basically a belief that the nation should protect the interests of native-born citizens rather than immigrants. So a lot of times they created laws against immigrants or policies, one of which are going to be limitations on who or what groups can come into the United States and which ones could not. And then you have this other thing, which is called xenophobia, which is a fun word to say, but not a fun thing to be or to experience. And that is like an extreme dislike or fear of people from other countries. It extends to anything deemed foreign as well. So people would avoid products coming from other countries or something that's deemed was made by someone from a foreign country. Irish immigrants face prejudice or discrimination because they were Catholic and because they were poor. There's going to be a lot of people who don't like Catholics in the United States, and most of the people were Protestant, and they're going to start actually attacking Catholics. Protestant mobs in big cities were constantly harassing them, and others resented their willingness to work for super cheap labor. So a lot of Americans were upset because these Irish immigrants are coming in willing to work for pennies, and just so they can get some sort of food on their table. And Americans were demanding at least semi-fair labor. But you have the owners of factories were not hiring them, they were hiring the immigrants because they could give them less money. Sounds familiar. I'm not going to comment on that. But yeah, think about modern day America. That's one of the problems that we have, is that people are willing to work for cheap, and people are upset about it. So they're going to be, while this is a time of a lot of prosperity, there are going to be some limitations, such as, the whole xenophobia and nativism thing, but also liberty and prosperity limitations, such as the right to compete for economic advancements. Some people aren't going to be able to, or going to be stuck in their situation. People are going to see success stories, the self-made land, the creation of the middle class. You have people who work in secretaries and clerks and teachers and lawyers and doctors. They're going to see these people, and it's going to start creating this idea of the American dream of, if you work hard and you do your best, you can have opportunities to grow and be prosperous and maybe get to middle class or even to riches. Women are also going to experience some setbacks in society, particularly from this new idea called the cult of domesticity, think like domestic. This is why like demure like is referring to domestic or domesticity. So like, a lot of times like people are like, why are you talking about that? Like when you say, oh, so demure, because people think you're referring to this. Basically, under the cult of domesticity, women were expected to stay home and then take care of their families. Women were supposed to act frail and dependent on man and not be seen in the public. Basically, stay home and hang out with other women and take care of their children. Um, so women weren't really allowed to like really do much, especially if they're middle class. They're expected to stay home. The only women really working were the like poor women who had to work. So like if you think like the Southern Mistress or like during like the antebellum period, like the women who stay home in their big frilly dresses with their fans and just take care of the kids and sip on sweet tea or mint juleps and don't do anything. That was kind of the idea. You were supposed to be frail and dependent, and your husband was supposed to take care of everything, and you're not supposed to do anything. You're also going to cause. You're also going to have a problem. So, like in 1819, there's going to be a recession. In 1837, there's a depression, which is going to cause unemployment in the United States. So, as industry grew, strikes began to break out when workers protested poor working conditions and low wages. In 1837, the Well Bills announced a 15% wage cut. 800 million girls organized a strike. Basically, they said we're not going to work until you pay us more. They stopped work and tried to force employers to respond to their demands. Although only 1 or 2% of workers in the United States were organized, the 1830s and 1840s saw dozens of strikes, many for higher wages, but some for shorter working hours. 12-hour days are really long days. Employers defeated most of these strikes because they could easily replace them with unskilled workers, such as like Irish immigrants. With people who arrived from Europe who desperately needed jobs. So Irish immigrants, and later on like Chinese workers as well. But yeah, that's it for today in this slideshow. I hope you enjoy. I'm sorry I'm not as enthusiastic. I am tired and don't feel good. But yeah, so tomorrow will be, I hopefully will be at school. If not, then be on the lookout for another video. But yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to either comment in Google Classroom or send me an email. But I miss y'all. Please be good for the sub. Yeah. Bye.